2026 is going to be an awesome year. We got some pretty cool stuff coming up. First off, we got Foundations of Recovery. This is our flagship program. We're starting it in January.
This is for anyone, man, woman, or couple who wants to come and reclaim their heart from shame, trauma, and betrayal. We start off with an education on all sorts of principles, give you the common language. We feed you from a fire hose in terms of all things recovery.
It is such a great start to recovery. And we get at the roots of things, Tyler. This isn't like any other program. Like, this is our healing journey in process, and Foundations is where we begin.
If you look at the value that you're getting there to kick off a good recovery with all of the right education, all of the right language, and a team to get you started while also being directed by Brannon and myself through the whole process, what a deal.
So if you're interested, if you're struggling, if you've been wanting to do something for a long time, jump into this. This only comes around every so often, and we would love to have you there.
Click the link in the description to sign up for it. And to make it even sweeter, we're also including a raffle for a free pass to the Radiant Dawn retreat. Anyone who signs up for Foundations will be added to the raffle for that free Radiant Dawn pass. If you're a man and you sign up for Foundations, your name still gets entered, and you can give that pass away if you win it to any woman that you want to.
So what you're saying, Tyler, is if you sign up and participate in Foundations, you could possibly go to Radiant Dawn for free?
That's exactly what I'm saying, which is crazy because Foundations by itself is already an insane value.
Man, I sound so salesy. But it actually is awesome. So come to Foundations. And even if you don't come to Foundations, sign up for Radiant Dawn. It's beyond therapy, the best healing experiences that you can have.
Click the link below and come join us. Why is narcissism overdiagnosed in recovery? Welcome to the Real Talk Recovery Podcast with the Therapy Brothers.
We're brothers, we're therapists, and we know recovery.
Bring your stories, your questions, your successes with real recovery.
All right, Tyler. We'll get into that one, but before we do, I have a review that I really want to share. So okay. it's a long one. So just be patient here. It says inspired guidance. And it's a 5-star review. And it says, Tyler and Brannon are exceptionally gifted therapists who speak truth and do it in a way that will illuminate your heart, soul, and mind. If you're reading this review or looking at this podcast, chances are you really need this in your life. If you've been affected by sexual addiction, this may be an answer to your prayers. There are so many priceless gems throughout these episodes. I have listened to most of their episodes, and I also attend one of Tyler's groups, and he's consistently on his A game. He's genuine, honest, and open about his past. He practices what he preaches and knows how to help others. Without any reservation, I can say he is the best therapist there is. Brannon is a close second. Sorry, Brannon. I'll leave it there.
You wanted to do that just to make my head big, or what?
Well, we always joke. Tyler always. So I am Tyler's what I call his compadre, which means I'm second fiddle to this master here that graces my presence, which I'm grateful for. So
I always consider myself the understudy to my little brother. Like,
whatever.
It takes a ton of humility to have to be the understudy to your little brother.
There's proof right there. I just read it.
That's why
that is not a true statement.
That's why you wanted to read it. Yeah. Well,
no, I go to these. I think I mentioned this before. I go to these retreats and things, and Tyler's clients show up, and just I don't know what you do, man.
Whatever.
They just worship the ground you walk on.
No, they don't.
And well, actually I do, because I know you're the man. So
whatever, man.
I gotta say that review was really nice and awesome. And I really appreciate that person sharing it.
We do appreciate the reviews. Actually, I really do appreciate that. And Brannon, I know that you did that just to kind of toot my horn for a minute, but the truth is that we get a lot of feedback on you. And I've already got a poll going from all of our past retreat attendees. And right now, at about a 2-to-1 clip, when I ask who's the favorite brother, you're the one who's higher
whatever.
Than me, so
whatever. Yeah.
So
that's not true. But
anyway, we do appreciate your reviews. So thank you. And thanks for sharing, Brannon.
Yeah. One more thing before we dive into this topic. we want some guests. So please go over to realtalkrecovery.com. And we love talking to couples. We love talking to individuals. There's no topic that's too weird or too complex or too hard to talk about. If you just need a little bit of help or want to bounce it off of two therapists that have pretty much seen it all, realtalkrecovery.com.
Yeah, we were booked out for almost 3 months for quite a while, and then we kind of tapered it down. So now there are.
I think we scared some people off, Tyler.
Yeah, maybe we've done that too a little bit, but there are some openings in the near future within the next couple of weeks that are open here. So realtalkrecovery.com, hit submit a question or ask a question, and then you can either submit one via writing, which we hardly ever get to, or you can sign up to become a caller on the show, and you can come on. You can always come with a different name or an alias if you want to, but we'd love to have your questions. You callers are the ones that make the show as amazing as it is. So
absolutely. Yeah. All right, Tyler. So I want to ask you, you kind of brought this topic up, and this topic of overdiagnosing narcissism, which is an interesting thing to talk about. Why are you bringing up this topic?
You know, I was kind of thinking about this. There's a roundabout way to get to this topic, and it came from a different diagnosis issue that I think is a problem, where I was listening to some things on the struggle with like boys in America and talking about the education system and what happens in the education system with our boys especially, but with kids in general, and how for a long period of time, there's been several years where ADD or ADHD has been basically the diagnosis du jour for any kid that shows any type of energy at school, right?
So the wild at heart kid running around.
Yeah, the things we teach for a healthy masculinity, masculine recovery. Pretty much every kid that's in school that would apply those principles would be diagnosed with ADD.
Right. We're not saying that ADD is not a real thing or anything like that, but what you're saying is it's overdiagnosed.
I think that it actually does people who have a real ADD or ADHD a disservice, because it's been so highly overdiagnosed that it's almost become like,
you're right,
cheap. Right. And I think what happens, so I was thinking about that and just thinking about what happens in schools with kids and things, and whether or not that's a benefit or a hindrance for a lot of people. And there's a diagnosis that we get in recovery all the time that people come through the door all the time with, and they're like, hey, I've been doing a lot of research and I've diagnosed usually it's my husband. I diagnosed my husband with narcissism. So that's the issue. He's a narcissist.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Or they've been to a therapist who has diagnosed the partner as a narcissist.
Yeah. And I wanted to maybe just kind of have a discussion back and forth with you today, Brannon, about like, what's the benefit of giving that diagnosis? Is it legitimate? And in my opinion, I believe that it's actually overly diagnosed to the detriment of recovery, compared to like other diagnoses that would be, I think, more pertinent or more helpful.
Yeah. But okay, Tyler, I do want to say this maybe before we dive in. If you can self-diagnose or get a diagnosis from a professional that your partner is narcissistic, it can be really validating to your pain.
Yes. And it gives some language to it, right?
It gives some language. It's also like, oh, that's why I'm in so much pain. That's why I'm so miserable. That's why I feel so disconnected, and why I feel so manipulated, because my partner freaking sucks. Like, they suck, and they're not built to be in healthy relationships. And you know what? This isn't a me problem. This is a them problem. And so when you're in a sucky relationship, Tyler, it does feel good to get some answers.
For sure.
And it feels good to kind of put it on that and say, look, there's no hope here. There's no hope here for like trying to make this better. So I need to own the fact that he's a narcissist, or she's a narcissist, or whatever.
Yes.
And now I have a reason to kind of work my way out of this relationship.
Yeah, you're right. And, I have a client who, she always says this, and it really helps her in her own recovery, that with whatever's coming up, whether she's doing EMDR, trauma work, or other things, even this topic, if you can name it, you can tame it. So name it to tame it, so to speak. And so there is something about having that and going, oh, okay, all these criteria fit. It makes sense. I'm no longer crazy. There's some actual diagnosis here. And it can be really helpful, right? That's one of the blessings of any type of a diagnosis. Why you go anywhere and you get this diagnosis is like, theoretically, the benefit of the diagnosis.
I got an answer.
It makes sense what's happening for me. I've got an answer. Now what do I want to do with it because I have an answer, right?
Right.
And so I think that part of it we don't necessarily want to steer away from. I just think we need to be careful because there's a lot of other things that are going on when you're dealing with an addiction that sure look a lot like narcissism. And if you diagnose as narcissism, it's actually, in my opinion, oftentimes becomes more hopeless than other diagnoses that would also be fitting, but that offer actually more hope.
Well, so let me just kind of explain what you're saying, Tyler. In the DSM, or the Diagnostic Criteria Manual that we use for mental health disorders, there's different axes, meaning there's different categories that mental disorders fall under. And there's the axis 1, there's the mood disorders. You take something like an addiction, although it's difficult to get into recovery and to get better, you absolutely can. You can get into recovery. Axis 2 disorders or personality disorders like borderline or narcissism. And those personality disorders are much more difficult to get into recovery. You can learn how to manage the symptoms. You can learn how to be aware of them. But it can feel pretty hopeless if you have an axis 2 disorder. And so what I hear you saying, Tyler, is, the prognosis for addiction is different than the prognosis for narcissism. And when we label it as narcissism, although they look very similar, someone struggling with an addiction has a lot of traits of a narcissist. And sometimes they are actually a narcissist who has an addiction.
Yes.
But the prognosis is very different when you're treating addiction versus treating narcissism, right?
That's what I'm getting at exactly is, and I'll say this that I need to express my own biases. I tend to look for the least invasive diagnosis that I can give to somebody when I'm diagnosing, because I don't like the idea of labels. And so with that bias that's already there, like, our listeners need to know that that's my bias coming into this. I tend to look for the most hopeful diagnosis that I can possibly give that meets the criteria.
But Tyler, I want to kind of push back on you on this a little bit. And doesn't that set up a partner who's married to a narcissist? Doesn't that set them up for some danger? Like, if they come into you for therapy and you're like, no, I'm not going to label them as a narcissist. Right. I'm going to make sure they're just struggling with an addiction or something else. Doesn't that take the kind of their feet out from under them a little bit if they are in a marriage with a narcissist?
That's a valid concern, Brannon. And I'm not saying I wouldn't diagnose somebody as a narcissist, but I'd be looking for some specific kinds of things. You would be careful inside of how things are being demonstrated that would indicate narcissism over some of these other things.
Okay.
Right.
So I'm curious.
Yeah. We'll go through some of the criteria here, and I'll kind of explain maybe what some of the things that I'm talking about, but I also just want our listeners to know that that's kind of how I operate. So they can take what I'm saying with a grain of salt too.
One thing too, Tyler, side note, it's okay to decide to divorce somebody who's struggling with an addiction, who's refusing to get into recovery.
Yeah.
You don't I guess what I'm saying is, you don't need the reason of hopelessness and narcissism to say, okay, now I have a ticket out. If they're breaking your boundaries and they're doing it long term and they're refusing to get into recovery,
and they don't want to work recovery, it's
whether we call it narcissism or addiction or whatever it is, you need to
set your boundaries
and have your boundaries. And we talk about this all the time with our guests, Tyler, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So we in no way are saying, well, if they're not diagnosed as a narcissist, then you should stay in your marriage and you should stick it out because they could get better, right? We're not saying anything like that.
No, of course not. I think both you and I would always say to every one of our clients, regardless of what's going on in your life, you need to live first and foremost in congruence with your own values and set boundaries accordingly. And it doesn't really matter what the diagnosis is, those boundaries should still be in place.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yep.
So, so let's just talk a little bit about this, because I think it's really easy to see why these words get interchanged when you're dealing with like any type of an addiction, especially like a sexual addiction. Okay.
Right. Yes.
So there's a few things that you would call like sort of like core features of narcissistic personality disorder. Okay. The first one is grandiosity. A person whose narcissistic personality disorder has an exaggerated sense of their own self-importance. They feel superior to others and that no one deserves any special treatment other than them.
Yeah.
And then they also oftentimes inside this grandiosity, they have fantasies of unlimited success or brilliance or power. Power is a big theme with narcissists or things like that.
Yep.
So that's the first one. Second one is,
Tyler, I just want to say the feeling from the partner's point of view is like, man, they're kind of a prideful jerk who can't connect to me. Like they're more connected to themselves.
Yeah.
And very egocentric.
Yeah.
And can't connect to me because they're grandiose feelings of who themselves.
Right. Yeah.
That's kind of how it feels.
Was it you, Brannon, that was telling me the story about one of their clients, that maybe it was a different person I was talking to, that their client came in and it was like true kind of pure narcissist. And inside the appointments, at the end of every appointment, this client would say, "You're so lucky to have me as a client, so I can kind of educate you about this stuff." And then after they finished treatment, they wrote a letter of recommendation for the therapist and said, "You're going to probably want to give this to future clients." That'll, like that's that like sense of like grandiosity, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I'm
Oh, thank you.
Like it's a gift that you get to come and like do therapy with me, right?
Yeah.
So like that's the grandiosity. The second level, and we're going to go through actually quickly. I'll try to go quickly, but we're going to go through 8 of these.
Okay.
The second one is excessive need for admiration. They have to be the center of attention, and they often take over conversations. And anytime they get ignored, they feel slighted or mistreated.
Yeah.
So,
and Tyler, I wouldn't say that's just verbal, it's energetic. So they can be in a room quiet, but they know that like people are focused on what they're thinking and what they're feeling and what's going on inside of them. And if that's not happening, then they'll try to insert and take over.
That's right. Number 3 is they have superficial and exploitive relationships, meaning that oftentimes with the narcissist, people are the means to the end rather than the relationships themselves.
Yep.
So they're valued in the sense of what can you give to me rather than, or how can I use you rather than I'd like a relationship with you.
Tyler, this one is one of the most pervasive, I think, that we see. There's narcissistic parents who use their children for their own validation. There's narcissistic partners who won't divorce, or, because they're like, I'm using you to look good. I'm using you to look like I'm a good father. I'm a good husband. I'm doing all these things. So you are there for my image. That's what you're there for. And so I use you for that. And you can imagine whether you're their child or their partner or whatever, how that feels.
Yeah, absolutely. The fourth category is a lack of empathy, which I think a lot of people that we work with in recovery really feel that this is one that's like very common. Like, yeah, like that's what I feel all the time. They're very limited in the ability to care about the emotional needs of other people.
And that's one, Tyler, that really like emulates addiction. Like that. Yeah. That's why someone struggling with an addiction gets called a narcissist a lot, because they suck at empathy.
You can even, I mean, we'll go back down the list here, but everything I mentioned so far already kind of looks like can look like an addiction, right?
Right. And we'll talk about why too, Tyler, because we know why. Yeah.
The next one is identity disturbance. Their sense of self is very superficial, extremely rigid, and often fragile, even though it doesn't look like it on the outside. Self-stability depends on maintaining the view that they're exceptional, and they have to have this grandiose sense of self that's easily threatened, and they deny realities that challenge any of their grandiosity.
Yeah.
The sixth one is difficulty with attachment, obviously, and dependency. They rely on feedback from the environment. They only stay in relationships that make them feel grandiose and keep their positive self-image. Their interactions are superficial, and they often actually avoid real intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
Chronic feelings of emptiness and boredom. They feel empty, bored, and depressed when they're not being paid attention to. And then the last one is that they have a real difficulty with life transitions, meaning they feel life feels unbearable when change happens that they don't get to be in control of.
And they want to be in control.
So if we were to go back down that list, it becomes very simple to go, wow, like, in fact, it almost looks like it fits perfectly for what you might consider someone who's stuck in an addiction, because what does an addiction do?
Well, it's an attachment disorder. It disconnects.
Okay, so there's the attachment part. It causes disconnection. It also causes self-centeredness. It also contributes to something called alexithymia, which actually robs you of the ability to feel and express emotions, which then takes you out of the ability to be empathetic. And so it
also causes shame, which then makes it so that you can't be vulnerable. So you're always defended, and that's the attachment.
The shame screens too, and that can also come across as that like need for admiration or that grandiosity sometimes when the shame screens are coming up, right?
Yep. Yeah. But Tyler, I think that a little story. Like when I got into treating addiction, I remember my first couple days working at this clinic where I was treating substance abuse. And one of the therapists kind of smiled and said, like, do you really know what you're getting yourself into? And I thought, well, what does he mean? And then I started sitting in on some groups, started taking some clients who are really deeply into addiction. And I realized what he meant. And I mean, what did he mean, Tyler?
As far as like dealing with the people with addictions?
Yeah. Like day in and day out.
The grind.
Yeah. Why is it such a grind?
Because there's so much lack of insight. There's, early on in recovery, because you're dealing with those different stages of change where some people are what you might call pre-contemplative, meaning they don't even know they got a problem yet.
Denial.
And so you have to work through the layers of denial. You have to work through the layers of selfishness, and then you have to work into places of trying to get motivation to shift from an outside place to an inside place. And we know that with like dealing with addictions, it takes a lot of concerted efforts for most people before they finally gain real traction in their work. My
supervisor said, like, hey, one of the first things you can learn here is don't believe anything you hear. Like, just don't believe it. And I know that sounds bad, but like, and what she's saying is like, someone with an addiction is going to lie to you again and again and again. They're going to be in denial. They're going to disconnect. They're going to manipulate. All of these things are happening because of all of these tools, all of these manipulations are a means to an end. And that end is I can keep my addiction,
self-preservation.
And preserve myself, but I can also try to keep my life too. I can try to keep my family, my job, my whatever it is. So what I need to do is live in this state of constant disconnection and constant manipulation, which feels horrible in a relationship. And so coming back to the narcissistic characteristics that you talked about, Tyler, there is a difference between why somebody with an addiction does what they do and why somebody with narcissism does what they do. Right?
Right. Exactly. And even though there's definitely some parallels and some commonalities, right? And this is maybe something that I wanted to kind of speak to, because it's so hard, even as we're talking about it. I want to explore it with you because I even have a hard time finding the language for it sometimes. But when I get a partner, say, who comes to me and says, "Hey, my partner is a narcissist," and they want me to confirm it, I'll go down the list of all of these different criteria, and I'll kind of give you the real criteria if we're diagnosing it. How is it diagnosed? You need You need 5 of the 9 traits to be diagnosed: a grandiose sense of self, preoccupation with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, or beauty, the belief that you are special and unique and can only be understood or associate with other special people, require excessive admiration, has a sense of entitlement, is interpersonally exploitive, taking advantage of others, lacks empathy, envies others or believes others are envious of them all the time, and then shows arrogant, haughty behaviors and attitudes. Mm-hmm. Technically speaking, we could find a lot of people that I would consider struggling with an addiction would also meet this specific diagnosis. But when I have a partner come into my office, where I kind of maybe draw a distinguishment is when I'm dealing with someone who I would consider like classic narcissist, the one that stands out to me a lot is that they really almost don't even have a capability to feel remorse, sadness, regret, or to express that. Right. And when I have a partner come in and say my partner's a narcissist, and then I'm sitting there thinking, well, my last one-on-one with this person, they were on my couch sobbing because they feel so terrible about the things that they've done.
Yeah,
right. They're remorseful. They're sad about it. They're working towards trying to show this like skill of empathy, and I see a real effort towards that. I have a hard time going, yep, let's diagnose him as a narcissistic personality type, because I see the work trying to happen, and I actually see deeper down that emotion that's coming through, even though it's not really coming through to the partner yet, because they haven't learned how to be vulnerable enough yet.
Right. So they're struggling with that attachment issue. But you're not, but it's feeling like narcissism to the partner.
For sure. It looks and feels that way.
So much disconnection.
Yes.
But that you're absolutely right. That remorse, that self-reflection that's going on, a narcissist would not do.
I think that's another one, Brannon, self-reflection. So there's a willingness to try to gain awareness, there's self-reflection, and there is sadness and remorse that's demonstrated, at least inside the therapy office with me, that I'm going, okay, like I feel like I'm dealing with something a little bit different than narcissism here, even though it looks a lot the same.
I think what you're kind of uncovering here is that a narcissist almost like does not have the ability like to do those things. Like it's out of the realm. Whereas somebody struggling with an addiction, or let's just say a lot of shame, is good at pushing people out and away when they need to.
With the shame screens.
With the shame screens. But their heart can still connect to themselves and the pain of others. It's interesting, Tyler. A while back, and tell me what you think about this. I did an intake, and this guy was saying like how remorseful he was, how sorry he was for the things he'd done with his addiction, and how and he felt really genuine about it. He laid out specific things that he'd done in his marriage that were not okay, and then he proceeded to tell me that I am a narcissist. I'm a narcissist, and I've been diagnosed with that, and I need to work on my narcissism, and blah blah blah. So he goes on and on, and so I say I really don't. I would not diagnose you with narcissism. And about a year later, I got an email from him, and he said, "You did me a bunch of damage because I told you I was a narcissist, and you told me that I wasn't, and I absolutely am. You know, I continue to hurt my wife, and although he makes his phone calls in his groups, he's got some confidence, maybe some arrogance even going on, but he can self-reflect and see how he's hurting people, and." And it's what's interesting about this, Tyler, is I read his email and I thought this email in and of itself is proof that you're not a narcissist. You trying to diagnose yourself so badly with narcissism is something a narcissist would probably never do. Do you see what I'm saying?
Unless that's how they find their grandiosity.
Yeah, unless he's trying to like show like, but like with like deep like. He's trying to take accountability is what it felt like for something. And so he had to use this, I'm a narcissist, to take that accountability. That's not something a narcissist would do. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Right. And that's where I think for you and I as a therapist, it becomes a little bit more nuanced, where you're trying to tease between the lines, and again, maybe it's what you said earlier, that it doesn't matter if you're diagnosed with this addiction or alexithymia or narcissism, as long as the diagnosis is used towards improving. I just see it. It seems like for most people, the label that gets attached to the bigger diagnosis of narcissism seems to not be as helpful as saying, yeah, you've got these tendencies for sure. You are selfish. You're self-centered. You've got shame screens coming up. Let's go to work on your shame. Let's go to work on your emotion regulation. Let's go to work on your empathy skills. Let's go to work on all of that stuff. And you can be in recovery, and you can heal some of those things. Whereas if you're dealing with someone with true narcissism, maybe what we're getting at is that it feels more like you're starting way up the chain into pre-contemplation with a client, where they don't even know. Like, it's going to be so much work just to get them to even admit.
When Tyler says pre-contemplation, what he's saying is somebody who isn't even acknowledging that there is a problem.
Yeah. Like, you come into the office and the outside world, you're like, yeah, nobody likes to be around you. You have a hard time keeping a job. You got there's all this stuff. And their response back is, yeah, it's not fair. I don't know why they do this. Like,
yeah, what
they
problem?
they don't see how amazing I am. Like, this is, it's all about what the world is doing to them rather than what they're manifesting in their world. And then as a therapist, you have to start at further back going, dang, we gotta try to help them gain some insight. And for someone with narcissistic personality disorder, that's a long, hard road to help them gain that kind of insight. Whereas someone who's struggling with an addiction, once you build trust with them and they start to show you their vulnerability a little bit and come through their shame a little bit, they start to show that insight and go, yeah, I made some seriously bad decisions and I've hurt lots of people. I can't even tell some of those people yet that, because I'm scared of what might happen, but I know I did it.
Right.
And to me, when I hear that and I feel that tone, I feel like I'm dealing with something a little bit different than narcissistic personality disorder.
Yeah. Tyler, I have one of my clients, honestly, one of my favorite clients ever. He was in groups with me for years, and all of his group members would describe him as like one of the most humble, just hardworking, self-reflective dudes ever. Like, just amazing. And he got put with one of the therapists here, and the therapist had met with his wife first and immediately diagnosed him with narcissism. Like, he's a narcissist. And it's interesting that therapist has since been let go, by the way. But it's interesting what happened, because to him, it kind of was like, well, now I'm condemned to this. Like, this is like, I don't know what to do now from here. But also to her, it was quite hopeless, because it was like, well, that's why I'm so miserable, because like, he's just a total jackass that I can't do anything about this. Like, it's, and to me, I was frustrated with the therapist, because the therapist was absolutely missing the diagnosis 100%. And how damaging it was to throw that diagnosis out there when that's not what it was. It hurt him, it hurt her, it hurt their relationship. And I don't know where that therapist was coming from with that diagnosis, other than he heard the spouse's pain. And so he took that spouse's pain as, this guy's a total jerk, so therefore he's a narcissist.
Right. Or you could go back through that criteria, through the pain that therapist is hearing, and without ever having met the person.
Yeah, you could say, well, see, he's doing that, and he's doing that.
And this. Yeah, I get that it does line up to look pretty narcissistic. Right. So you can't totally fault the therapist for whatever information,
because of what he's hearing from the spouse. Right.
Like,
and that's what, but I think that's what you're saying, Tyler, is as therapists and as partners, I think we need to pump the brakes just a little bit. Like, pump the brakes. Everybody acts those ways sometime. Everybody's unempathetic or grandiose or self-serving, or like we all do those things to some degree sometime. Just because we do them once, or we've done all of them, doesn't mean that we have a personality disorder. Right.
My wife might say I am. She says I'm arrogant sometimes, so maybe I'm narcissistic.
Well, I shouldn't have read that review today.
Yeah, I know.
Either.
Well, yeah, exactly. Like,
yeah.
You were just repeating what I already knew to be true.
Yeah, you're a narcissist.
So, yeah. But I think that's, you bring up a good point there, Brannon, and I appreciate you sharing the story. And I know that this topic that we're talking about here, I know we're getting a little short on time. This topic that we're talking about here definitely it's going to stir up some questions and some feelings with all of our listeners here. And we would welcome any of you to follow up with some feedback or some comments or some questions, or even be callers on the show if this is something that is striking a nerve. I wanted to bring this up, and I want to just distinguish this because I feel like we can do better work when we focus sometimes less on the labels and more on the principles. Now, the labels are important sometimes, and yes, we do have, I have worked with classic narcissists before, and you and I both could go and pick out a few of our favorites and tell some stories right now, probably.
Well, and Tyler, somebody in a relationship with them is in an abusive relationship.
Yes. Right? Yeah. Oh, yeah. If you're in a relationship with a classic narcissist, there's no doubt that you're being abused, because one of the trademarks is that the relationship is coercive.
Yeah.
Right. So, and there's a lack of empathy and understanding, because it's all one way. Everything is one way.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And you should take steps to take care of yourself accordingly through getting structure, support, healthy boundaries, continued education, all of that stuff.
Tyler, we don't claim to be experts on narcissism, yet we deal with it all the time. And I think, and I don't know the numbers on this, but I think most narcissists probably struggle with addiction to a degree. And so
there's a higher prevalence of suicidality in a narcissist as well, which is interesting with such a grandiose sense of self. Yeah.
So we have a lot of that dual diagnosis coming through our doors. And when you're dealing with both, then it, like, how can you distinguish it? You can't really. It just, and so I want to refer people over to a resource. It's a podcast called Waking Up to Narcissism. And it's by my good friend, Tony Overbay. And he is an expert on narcissism. And as you listen to him, maybe you can better understand what narcissism is. And I would say, if you're educating yourself about this because you're trying to figure out whether you're in a relationship with a narcissist, before you already think that you are, like, don't do confirmation bias with this, but actually educate yourself, actually evaluate this. And if you are in a relationship with a narcissist, then you absolutely need help. You need support. You need to know how to navigate that.
I'd say, Brannon, just to add to that, and if you are in a relationship where you're even questioning that, you probably still need support and help.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And if someone sat down with me or you, Tyler, we could help them evaluate and flush this out. And you know what? Your recovery is actually very similar. If you're with someone struggling with an addiction who's just raging in their addiction, or a narcissist, because they're showing up with a lot of the same symptoms. So your recovery with your own healthy boundaries, your support system, your own trauma work, all of that stuff is the same in order to navigate a relationship with a difficult person.
That's right.
So.
All right. Well, we stirred it up a little bit today, Brannon.
Yeah, it's good discussion, Tyler.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for those of you listening, again, if you have questions or thoughts, please feel free to give us feedback, come on the show, whatever you want. Hopefully this is helpful.
Yeah. Give Tyler feedback because this was his episode. So
send it to Brannon. No, we love to have these kinds of conversations. And there's a reason why we're doing the episode. So,
absolutely.
So thank you for being here. Hopefully this is helpful. We appreciate you being here and supporting our show.
Yep. See you guys.